Hello and welcome. This is TVRI's Evening News, bringing you the latest reports and information from throughout the world. I'm Tiya Mariadi.
And I'm Bambang Harino Suroso. Reports from the United States and Colombia are today's top stories. And on the ASEAN News Exchange, we have a report from Singapore. But first, the headlines.
U.S. President George W. Bush urges Palestinians to give Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon a chance. The Merapi volcano in central Java erupts this morning, causing a blast of hot lava discharging as far as 6 kilometers. A U.S. Navy submarine collides with a Japanese fishing boat 9 miles off the coast of Hawaii's Oahu Island.
This is TVRI Evening News, the first English news in the country.
And those were the headlines. Now we go over to Tiya for the first report. Go ahead, Tiya.
Thank you, Bambang. U.S. President George W. Bush has urged Palestinians to give Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon a chance to form a government and fulfill his promise to pursue peace. Bush said this was the message he gave to Palestinian President Yasser Arafat in a telephone call on Thursday. Sharon, mistrusted by many Arabs, was elected on Tuesday, raising concerns that 4 months of Israeli-Palestinian violence will go on. Bush, who has taken a cautious approach to involvement in the Middle East, talked with Arafat shortly before the car bomb exploded.
Do what he said he wanted to do, which is to promote the peace in the region. And I certainly hope that people recognize that change does not necessarily mean that the peace process won't go forward. And I think we ought to take Mr. Sharon for his word, and that is he wants to promote the peace in the Middle East. And I look forward to watching him put a government together and then fulfilling what he said he would do.
Are you concerned about the violence yesterday, the bombs?
I'm concerned about all kinds of violence, but I firmly believe that the best policy is to encourage leaders to just remain resolute in their willingness to promote the peace and give the Sharon government a chance to form a government and then to be able to do what he said he wanted to do, which is to promote peace in the Middle East.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Meanwhile, Colin Powell has announced his first overseas trip since becoming the U.S. Secretary of State will be to meet leaders in the Middle East later this month and then go to Brazil for a NATO meeting. U.S. Secretary of State Colin Powell announced on Friday he would visit the Middle East towards the end of February and then go to Brussels to meet NATO colleagues and European Union leaders.
Down here, I hope to be spending a lot of time. And I'm here this afternoon to let you know of the first trip. I think it's already been told to you by Richard Boucher, but my first trip will be to the Middle East region. I plan to visit in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, in Israel, in Gaza and the West Bank, Jordan, and to be in Kuwait on the 26th for the 10th anniversary Gulf War celebrations. And then I will be going from there on to Brussels, where I've been invited by NATO to join a meeting and exchange views with my NATO colleagues. I was invited by Lord Robertson, and I also hope at that same time and expect at that same time to meet with European Union leaders and Commission President Romano Prodi. And the purpose of this trip will be to share views with friends in the region, especially in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank, to make an assessment of the situation, talking to, I would expect, Chairman Arafat and the Prime Minister of Israel, Mr. Barak, if he is still in the caretaker status, of course, and also with Mr. Sharon. Gentlemen, what a beautiful room you have.
Colombian President Andrés Pastrana and the leader of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia have wrapped up 2 days of negotiations aimed at reviving stalled peace talks. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia rebels will return to formal peace talks, the country's largest guerrilla group said a joint statement after a meeting between its leader and President Andrés Pastrana. The FARC-EP will return to the table of dialogue, read an agreement signed by Pastrana and FARC leader Manuel Shurshot Marulana. after 2 days of talks in the rebels' demilitarized enclave in the south of the country. I believe that today we have revived the peace process in this country, Pastrana said in a news conference with the veteran rebel leader at his side. Formal peace talks to end the 37-year-old war will resume on February 14 and will tackle issues including a possible ceasefire in the conflict, which has claimed 35,000 civilian lives in the last decade alone. The peace process has lasted 2 years so far. The 13-point agreement also commits the two sides to find ways to carry out an exchange of sick prisoners and invites a group of unnamed friendly countries to assist peace negotiations in a meeting on March 8.
France and Britain agreed on Friday to impose tighter controls on their cross-channel rail link to try to stem record numbers on asylum seekers slipping into Britain. French President Jacques Chirac and Britain Prime Minister Tony Blair, speaking after a day of talks in the medieval town of Cahors in southwest France, called for wider European efforts to tackle human trafficking across the continent. Chirac's government promised at Friday's talks it would try to ratify by June an accord allowing immigration officers from both countries to check passengers boarding the train in Paris. That would close off a loophole which Britain says has allowed up to 400 people a month to sneak across the channel and claim asylum in London. In a joint news conference with Chirac, British Prime Minister Tony Blair said the issue of illegal immigration and asylum is one of the most serious problems in Europe.
When we meet, usually we have good news.
S'il vous plaît, monsieur. Richard.
The issue of illegal immigration and asylum is one of the most serious issues that faces Europe at the present time. It is, as I say, not just an issue for Great Britain, but for all countries in Europe. We have to find the right way of making sure that we treat the genuine case with real dignity, but take action against illegal trafficking in human beings. It is an appalling traffic. It is often connected with other criminality, the drugs trade, and other types of organized crime. This is TVRI Evening News, the first English news in the country.
And our home news. Merapi volcano, located on the border of central Java and Yogyakarta, erupted today at 5:30 a.m., causing a blast of hot lava as far as 6 kilometers. The Merapi alert has been put into effect in Sector 1 at Magelang. Rains of ashes reached Sukoharjo and Solo at 7:30, which are located 90 kilometers from Merapi. No casualties were reported, but the residents living around the area were evacuated. Cities such as Magelang, Muntilan and Yogyakarta are relatively safe from the volcanic ashes as the winds blew east heading to Klaten, Boyolali, Sukoharjo and Solo. Meanwhile, residents at Pemalang, the area closest to the Merapi, have gathered at the house of the village head, waiting to be evacuated by 15 trucks already prepared there. However, no orders to evacuate were issued as the Merapi alert status only applies to river sectors, Bebeng and Senowo at the southwest of Merapi. At the Kaliurang tourist site, dozens of search and rescue team members were on alert at several locations, including Gardu Pandang. At this site, during Merapi's explosion in 1994, several activities of the Merapi volcano have been detected since Friday, when rain occurred at its peak for 30 minutes and fog covered the area.
A combined search and rescue team on Friday morning found a charred spot in the forest in the Embah Valley of Purwakarta district, West Java, believed to be the site where missing helicopter was crashed. The spot was located on a slope of Mount Gedongan and the helicopter was a Bell 412. The search for the ill-fated helicopter was immediately mounted on Thursday by tracing the probable route the aircraft had taken. After a refueling stop in Subang Skalijati Airport on its flight from Semarang to Bandung, the helicopter lost contact with the Sastra Negara Airport Tower and then went missing. The chopper was believed to have crashed in a forest or plantation in Cikalong Wetan sub-district. Piloted by Bobby, the chopper was carrying 2 passengers whose identities were still mystery as their names were not on the list. At present, the crash was believed to have been caused by bad weather.
Meanwhile, thousands of houses and a similar number of agricultural fields in Serang area of Banten were inundated as the province's main river overflowed during the past few days. Ranging from 20 centimeters to 3 meters deep, the flood also inundated the Jakarta-Merak toll road, causing massive traffic congestion. Tens of buses and trucks had skidded off the road and sudden into the arrest. Drivers said heavy water caused their vehicles to slide onto the roadsides. By this afternoon, the water depth on the toll road had decreased to 30 centimeters, allowing smaller vehicles to travel. The head of the Toll Road Traffic Control Division, Suherman Marti, has said that the toll road part is now possible. Flooded out residents have temporarily moved to the grass margins of the toll road, setting up tents as temporary shelters. Over 2,000 people from 600 families chose to take refuge on the sides of toll roads. In Lebak Regency, at least 45 people died in the flood and landslides. Skin diseases has broken out among the refugees in the temporary shelters. Humanitarian aid has been pouring in from a number of welfare groups, among them the Buddhist Suchi group, who sends packages of daily necessities, blankets and food. Free medical service is also scheduled for this Sunday.
First Lady Madam Nuriyah Abdurrahman Wahid visits landslide victims in West Sumatra. Visiting West Sumatra, Madam Nuriyah Abdurrahman Wahid expressed her concern for the 6 regencies and 2 municipalities in West Sumatra which have been hard hit by landslides. At the township of Barung-Barung Belantai, Pesisir Selatan Regency, the First Lady spoke to people gathered there, urging them to be strong in the face of adversity and work hard to rebuild. She referred to the earthquake disaster which occurred at Padang Panjang in 1926 and the Kobe earthquake in Japan in 1966, where people worked together hand in hand to reestablish social institutions and set up emergency educational facilities. Madam Nuriyah Abdurrahman Wahid distributed cooking equipment, 1,000 cartons of instant noodles and 2,000 prayer mats. While in West Sumatra, the First Lady also visited the makers of handicrafts, explaining to them the function of the patent offices, which can provide intellectual property protection to Indonesian handicraft designs.
The public is urged to take precautions against the annual outbreak of mosquito-carried dengue fever, for which there is no immunization.
Outbreak of dengue fever annually occurs during the transitional climate at the beginning of the rainy season, with the number of reported dengue cases expected to increase during the season. The Deputy Director of East Jakarta's Pasar Rebo Hospital, Dr. Jarod, warns the public that controlling the mosquito population cannot be left to the government, but requires the active participation of the public to take the required precautions to prevent mosquitoes from breeding on their private property and in their neighborhoods. Pasar Rebo Hospital reports 164 cases of dengue fever, 1 patient of which has died from the disease. Dr. Jarod said that the hospital is currently admitting 2 to 4 new dengue patients daily. He added that essential preventive measures need to be implemented, such as treating water reservoirs with abati powder and cleaning neighborhoods of trash and other places where water can collect.
This is TVRI Evening News, the first English news in the country.
Reports from Japan: a U.S. Navy submarine collided with a Japanese fishing boat carrying high school students learning to fish off Hawaii yesterday. 9 people were missing after the boat sank 9 miles off the coast of Oahu Island.
26 survivors who huddled in 3 life rafts were brought ashore by the U.S. Coast Guard. Navy and Coast Guard vessels were searching for the missing people. The USS Greenville was on routine patrol south of Oahu when it surfaced about 1:45 p.m. local time, and its stern collided with the fishing boat, said a spokesman for Commander Navy Base of Pearl Harbor. The boat, the Chimaru, carried 20 crew members plus 2 teachers and 13 students from the Uejima Fishing High School in the southwestern Japanese prefecture of Chima. A Coast Guard petty officer said the boat sank quickly. The survivors were rescued by a 41-feet Coast Guard utility boat and a smaller Coast Guard rubber inflatable. They were taken to the Coast Guard station at Honolulu Harbor. Some walk off on their own, others were carried on stretchers and covered in blankets.
And next in this evening's talking point, we have with us the Deputy Chief of Mission of the Chilean Embassy, Diego Velasco, with Trecia Mariman, Trade Officer, Pro-Chile.
Yes, and we will discuss how Chile came out of its 1982 economic crisis, and we will also look at bilateral economic relations between the two countries. And TVRI's Chut Shahnaz will be hosting the segment.
Thank you, Tiya and Bambang. Viewers, Chile, the other side of the Pacific from Indonesia, stretches along the Pacific South American coast with almost 8,000 kilometers of coast, from deserts in the north to glaciers in the south. It has a four-seasons climate, and the land is rich in minerals, forests, agriculture, and fisheries. Between 1982 and 1984, Chile suffered a full economic and financial crisis in the regional collapse known as the American lost decade. For this, Chile went through an entire reform of its economy, opening its foreign market and allowing anyone in the world to operate according to the same rules and conditions as Chilean people do. With a market of 15 million people, its income per capita today is about $5,400 but the crisis in 1982 was well below $1,000. Some 13 years later, Indonesia has been hit with an economic crisis, also in the frame of a regional collapse, which has led to reforms all around Asia. This makes it interesting to look beyond our traditional sources of experience from developed countries towards new alternatives in our own crisis management and reforms. And since Chile was acknowledged as the first economic miracle coming out from the Latin American lost decade, we invited someone from Chile to share their views. So, viewers, here with me in the studio, we have Mr. Diego Velasco, Deputy Chief of Mission from Chile, and Mrs. Trecia Mariman, an economist that heads the Chilean Trade Office of Chile, namely Pro-Chile. Yes, Mr. Velasco and Mrs. Mariman, welcome to TVRI.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening. And recently, as we all know, in September 30th last year, President Wahid went on another trip abroad to Latin America, also visiting Chile. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's the first time since President Sukarno visited your country, wasn't it?
The first time of an Indonesian president in Latin America.
Yes.
Was Sukarno.
Yes.
But this is the first time an Indonesian president visited Chile.
Chile, right, yeah. It was a long time ago, right?
No, Sukarno never went there.
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay. So tell me about what do the Chile people see in Indonesia?
Well, because of the crisis, ASEAN floated in the front line, right, into Chile and into Latin America. So perhaps that was a useful point there, that people got to realize what's a big weight in the world economy of ASEAN. There, of course, we have been in crisis before, so in crisis we don't only see problems, we see opportunities.
Yes.
And we had a limiting of trade. Our trade slashed in half. And slashing in half, it means we have to look for other avenues to work. Yeah. And we realized that because of our own previous crisis process and our own reform, then we could share experience and services with Indonesia, and leading to joint ventures and works together between companies or institutions and regulations, and basically what all encompass a total economic reform.
Yeah, but are there any concrete steps taken between the two countries?
Well, in black and white, to start with, you need documents that tells you and gives you a framework. And this framework is bilateral agreements. We have had before trade bilateral agreements, but when trade moved more or less on its own mechanics before. But what is interesting is right after the crisis came in, there was a joint a working agreement in between the Central Bank of Chile and Bank Indonesia, because we have had this autonomy law and to create our autonomous central bank.
Yes.
And then there's a lot of cooperation in that sense since 1998. We have a Mantan, ex-governor of the Central Bank of Chile, came here a couple of times, and some of the directors, and then Indonesian bankers went to Chile at the number of 30 so far since then, to exchange views and to learn from our experience, not as to copy it, but to see where our mistakes.
That's right.
Very much similar is with the case of an agreement of promotion and protection of investments, which was signed in 1999.
Right. Yeah, okay. Mr. Velasco, okay, frameworks, they're good, okay. But what about things for the small and medium enterprises level that want to export to Chile? For instance, perhaps you can give me example that, your comment on that.
Okay.
Rather, she knows the best.
Mrs. Mariman, yes, okay.
Chile offers the largest free trade agreements network of Latin America with Mercosur, or South America and Canada, the Caribbean, Mexico, and currently negotiating with USA. This means is a market of not less than 450 million people, to which Chile is a real gateway, something like Singapore here. On exports, coal is the most important from Indonesia to Chile.
Yes.
But this is not attractive for small and medium enterprise.
That's right.
The trade platform effect is better seen from the Indonesian exports of football balls, bola sepak bola, the food
for the consumer products.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sepatu olahraga, then things like that.
Oh, I see. Yes.
The element there is important because there is a certain amount of balls, as an example, that goes to Latin American market. They arrive to Chile, a big bunch of it, produced in Central Java.
Yeah.
But they don't stay in Chile. They arrive in Chile, and about 70% of those balls for football are re-exported to Argentina and Brazil, which are the large markets.
Because Chile is like a getaway, like Singapore, right?
Gateway is a platform. Yes.
That's right.
A business platform.
Yeah, but why do I don't know, perhaps this, I heard a lot that Indonesians seem deterred to travel or to link with South Americans. I don't know the case. I don't know why, maybe because of the language problem or the lack of knowledge. So can you tell us perhaps why, or what is attractive to them in terms of business?
Actually, Chile is a country that are fully aware that the importance of trade to domestic development, and Chile has been very active in negotiating and the agreements like what I mentioned before. And this, besides the trade agreements and the open and large the Chilean market, it's also the tariff system in Chile. Chile applies unilateral tariff system, meaning that one tariff for all products
across the board.
Yes, okay.
And it's very interesting because today the official tariff rate is 11%, while the effective rate is lower at 8.5% for all products. While it's pushing to unilaterally lower its official rate to 6% in the year 2003.
Okay, but Mrs. Mariman, fisheries, as we know that it has been the star sector of Chile, I understand. It started almost from scratch. Are you doing something here also? Do you have something, agreement, or do you have a cooperation with the Indonesian counterpart?
Well, that, may I?
Yes.
Thank you. That is an area which we're focusing very much because, same as, let's put it this way, people in Indonesia normally look to the hills, more to the water. We had the same problem before, so we have an experience of building a fisheries industry from scratch, getting people from horses into ships.
Right.
And this is what we're trying to bring, because we start the level from the very, very bottom, from very poor villages, and now we are one of the big potencies in the world in fishing. And this experience is a developing country, it's a south-south sort of concept that applies to the lack of work, that you need to use a lot of, workmanship instead of only machines. This has led us to work with Indonesia in the field of fisheries under the framework of the protection and promotion of investment agreement. So we are focusing at this moment, under good reception from the government of Banten, to work in Banten with entrepreneurs there to develop hopefully a fish meal enterprise in order to produce fish meal to feed shrimp for exports. So you have a lot of people working, not only the fishermen, but the guys who plant and peternakan shrimps, and they do export with a high value added. That's one of the possibilities to work, and we are seeking very much into that.
So there is a concrete action has taken already with the Banten province.
We have had the first approach with His Excellency Ambassador Sinclair. He went on a visit, field visit for 3 days to Banten with Pak Gubernur, and the potential is there. Undoubtedly, there is a big potential there.
Right.
So now we are working with the Chilean entrepreneurs that would like to come in with their own capital goods to make joint ventures. It's not an investment; it's a joint investment.
Right. All right.
And it's also important because Chile intends to invest in the integrated fishing industry.
Right.
The integrated, yeah.
So, yeah. So one more question before, due to time constraint, Mr. Velasco. Let's say, among your reforms, there was an administrative one on a regionalization.
Yes.
Did this help your country to say promoting growth, granting that such big change is a difficult and long-term one?
Very much so. We were a very heavily concentrated country. Half of the world was the capital. The money, the work, everything was there. And we took about a total of 10 years of regionalization process in order for the provinces to start dealing themselves with the export world and to grow. And part of their own resources produced went back into the provinces to create new points of development.
Yeah.
Somehow, there is a process ongoing in Indonesia. It's a long process. It's not so easy anyhow.
How long would you say, based on your experience?
We have 50 million people. You have 200 million people.
Okay.
So the comparison is very unlikely.
Well, it's not apple to apple, yes, but...
but in our case, it started going very well after 10 years of
it's about 10 years.
Enforcing. Then you could see the provinces blooming on themselves strongly. I mean, really away from the central city. The documentation didn't have to go downtown and so on. For us, it worked pretty well. It was because we're a very expanded, long country.
Right. All right.
It was positive.
And so, once again, thank you very much for visiting us, Mr. Diego.
Sama-sama.
Mrs. Mariman. Oh, sama-sama. You speak Indonesian? Of course, you must be.
Sedikit aja.
How long have you been here?
About 10 years.
10 years.
About 10 years. But in 3 babaks, in 3 chapters, not one go.
All right. Thank you once again for coming to TVRI.
Most welcome.
All right. Viewers, now we go over to Tia and Bambang for the next item on TVRI News.
This is TVRI Evening News, the first English news in the country.
Thank you, Chut, Mr. Diego Velasco, and also Tresha Mariman. And he will have another babak with us in other TVRI Evening News program, of course, right? And that wraps up our news for this evening. Be sure to join us again tomorrow, same time, same channel on TVRI. I'm Tia Mariadi.
And I'm Bambang Harino Suroso. Thank you for joining us, and good night.
Good night.